So on Friday, we should find out if our MPs are going to be able to elect a president when the National Assembly meets for the first time since the elections. But there's still coalition negotiations underway. No certainty at this stage about what is going to happen. Professor Erwin Schwella is the director of CiviNovus. Professor, good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. So there are clearly negotiations underway. Do you think the parties involved in this really trust each other? And if they can't trust each other, can anyone really make progress in these talks?
I don't think they trust each other at all. It has been a very unique election with a number of the parties losing support and some gaining dramatic support. And it seems as if there's a lot of, shall we say, horse trading in the whole process. And broadly, it breaks down between two sets of groupings. The one I would broadly affiliate to those who want to protect the Constitution, and therefore we may call them the constitutionalists. And then those that are in a greater or less way wanting to get rid of the Constitution, and let's call them the anti-constitutionalists, being the MK and to some extent the FF. We also know that in general in South Africa, trust levels are low. There are research projects, for example, the Edelman Trust Research Project, which shows that South Africans have very little trust in government and even less in political parties. So yes, they don't trust each other. We have a trust deficit in South Africa, and this is a completely new, uncharted ocean. So trust is really called for, but not available.
So if it's not available, I mean, what happens next? How do people deal with this? I mean, yes, they could shake hands. Perhaps the best option, the president's already suggested this, there'll be a transparent, binding agreement. But each party would lose from its own constituency. The ANC loses if it works with the DA. I think it might lose if it works with MK and the EFF. MK and the EFF lose if they work with the ANC. The DA loses some support if it works with the ANC. There's a cost each way.
Well, let's just give a historic perspective. I was part of the negotiations towards the Constitution from about 1992 to 1994, the elections in 1994, and then thereafter the 1996 Constitution. Now, at that point in time, there was very little trust and there was many issues, even violent altercations between South African citizens. So it's not unusual. What we worked with then is something which I think is now also applicable. And we said, if we don't deal with this properly, we will be in a continued mutually hurting stalemate. There comes a point where there's very little principle in politics in any case. In all countries of the world, seemingly with more populism. In South Africa, definitely so. However, then it starts to play out in terms of not particularly principles, but interests. There are many people in the system who have a very definite, direct, reciprocal interest in getting the system going because their salaries are attached to that. There are people like the broader citizens who want good government and better governance. And then those interests start to play out. And somehow it seems as if South Africa has a way of going to the brink and then giving one step back. So within the context of the idea of that we have been there before, somehow we generally solve the issues and we do it on the basis of interests, not necessarily principles, and we expect and accept that there's very little trust involved in this. On the point of the particular voting public, well, they voted and they gave a mandate for negotiations. Now, obviously, they may not agree with the particular outcome of those negotiations, but that in some ways is now the mandate they've given those people who represent them. We work with a representative democracy in our institutions and also in this sense. And then if there are people who feel very much, have umbrage as a result of with whom their particular choice, party of choice, sets up a coalition, then so be it. Somehow we need to keep the system going and actually get it going and improve its particular traction in the next 5 years. Otherwise, we will have even less trust and bigger problems in the next 5 years.
In a way, I suppose each party has to do a cost-benefit analysis. If we work with this party, there'll be a little bit of pain for us. But if we don't work at all, there'll be more pain. Voters might punish us in the local election or the next national election because we did not work in a coalition. So do you have to sort of make sure that parties understand that they have more to fear from not working together than from working together, no matter the cost of that?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily that is the only, or shall we say, the sole choice. It's working together is going to happen, and it's going to happen because it's called for under the Constitution, and there seems to be a dynamic to work towards that. The issue is, of course, with whom do we work? Now, once again, when I started this particular input, I said there are the constitutionalists and the anti-constitutionalists. And in some ways, I would argue that if there are parties who want to break the system in order to get their will to get rid of the Constitution, then the public of South Africa, in many instances, and also through the continuous use of our institutions, such as our free media, such as our courts. Ex-President Zuma is a past master in using the institution of the courts. So the public wants the Constitution to be sustained. And on that basis, I think the public should and will be more forgiving if there is a constitutionally based, supporting the Constitution set of coalitions, and those who cannot subscribe to that should accept that they are in essence already to some extent out of the system, and that back to the supporters of the parties who go for that option will probably pull them through because there's a backing also of the public, of the majority of the public, and those people who want to destroy will then go ahead and they have to be met with the full force of the power of the state then.
Professor, I mean, there's an argument, a democratic argument, to say all of these negotiations should be happening in public. But it seems to me that might just make it impossible for any party to make concessions. Is it easier to negotiate behind closed doors? I'm a journalist. I hate the idea of people negotiating behind closed doors. But I accept sometimes it may be the only way you get a deal done.
Well, in all instances, whatever is in some ways conjured up in the dark and perhaps not so much more smoke-filled back rooms will be made public. And one of the institutions that our Constitution supports, often under pressure from politicians, is the free media. And there are obviously many, shall we say, self-interested and maybe even public-interested motives to get these things out into the open. It should actually be as transparent as possible. But it would be quite naive to, I think, accept and to expect that it will be completely transparent. Deals are being made, and of course there are talks about talks, and eventually it becomes transparent, and transparency should be the ideal. However, in all negotiation processes, wherever negotiation takes place, in terms of finding solutions or business deals, there are initial talks which are confidential, where fact-finding is done and people-finding happens. So I think that is normal, and we should expect that also in South Africa, as long as in the end everything is above board. And in any case, if there are any issues, our media, which are free under our Constitution, will definitely find a way to have the light of sunlight shine on it.
Thank you for the vote of confidence, Prof. I appreciate it. Professor Erwin Schwella is the director of CiviNovus. Do appreciate the time.